In the last video, you made a foldable looking at the graphing of a linear equation in y equals mx plus b form. So we learned in that video that y was your independent variable, m was your slope, how steep the line is, rise over run, x was your dependent variable, and b was where the graph crossed the y-axis. Now you're going to be working on some problems using your foldable for a reference. The first kind, we're going to have an equation given to you. Then you're going to state the slope and state the y-intercept. Well, remember from your foldable that slope is the number in front of the x when the equation is in y equals mx plus b format. So you will see a 2 in front of the x in 2x minus 4. So 2 is the slope. Where the graph crosses the y-axis is at the y-intercept, which is the number without an x beside it. So this graph crosses the y-axis at -4 and has a slope of 2. Now in front of the x this time is 2/3. So in the second problem, y equals 2/3 x plus 5, the slope, or how steep the line is 2/3. Remember that means rise over run, or change in y over change in x. Rise 2, run 3. Then you have a plus 5, and that is where the graph crosses the y-axis would be at 5. In the next example, -1/4 is in front of x, so that is the slope, and -4 is a number by itself, so that's your y-intercept. In the next problem, we have y equals 7. You'll need to learn that y equals 7 is the same thing as 0x plus 7. So 0 is the slope. You put that in blue. And the y-intercept is 7. This is a line straight across through the y-axis at 7. The next one has an exception to the rule because we don't take the number in front of x because it is not in y equals format. It's x is equal to 12. When you have an equation without the y value, when x is always 12, the slope is undefined. And the y-intercept, there is none. It will not cross over the y-axis. That is when you have no y in the problem. You only have an x. X is always equal to 12. Undefined slope. No y-intercept. And this last one's a little different because, like I had said with the foldable, it doesn't always have to have the x come first, mx plus b, but you do look for the slope as the number in front of the x. So the slope in here is -4. The y-intercept is that number without an x, and that is a +7. Because there's not a negative in front of it, so we assume it's positive. So it is a 7 for a y-intercept. So you will have some problems where you'll be asked to state the slope and the y-intercept for an equation. The slope is located in front of the x. The y-intercept is the number without the x. 2 special cases right here. One where there is a y, but there is no x, so the slope is 0. The y-intercept is the number by itself, 7. When there is no y at all, it's a special case. The slope is undefined, and there is no y-intercept. So that's one of the things we wanted to do with this lesson, is be able to state the slope and the y-intercept from an equation. Now you're going to get a series of blank graphs on your paper. I need you to write down the problem and work it out with me on your graph. Y equals 1/2 x minus 2. Okay, we want to name the slope, or we can use the letter m. That's the number in front of the x. That is 1/2. And remember, that is the rise over the run. And the b value is the number by itself, -2. And that is where the graph crosses the y-axis. So notice here is my y-axis. You see that? That is my y-axis. This, going straight across, is my x-axis. So don't forget those things, that is the x and the y-axis. So when we talk about where the graph crosses the y-axis is at -2. So right on the y-axis at -2, I'm going to put a dot. And that's where you're going to know where to start the graph of this line here. You start it at the y-intercept of -2. Then your slope is positive, so that should tell you your line's going uphill. So my rise is 1, and my run is 2. So I'm going to rise 1, run 2. That's going to put my next dot right here. Then I'm going to rise 1, and I'm going to run 2, and my next dot will go here. I can go the other direction, keeping that same pattern of 1, and then 2, and then I would put a dot right there. So I can go either direction. But the way I know which direction my line goes is by the slope. We talked about that. A positive slope will be going uphill. So once I put a dot at my y-intercept, you do not have to show the stair steps. I just did that to help you see the rise and the run. So I'm going to take those off. Those really are not part of the graph. It's just I was showing you the rise and the run. So that means that this is the graph of our line, y equals 1/2 x minus 2. Let's go through that process again. Y equals 2x plus 1. Okay, so our slope, our m, is in front of the x value. So m is equal to a 2. Again, I kind of got interrupted. I had to pause the video. The slope is 2. So the m is equal to 2. Every whole number has a 1 underneath it that is understood. It's something we don't write on every whole number, but there is a 1 underneath. So this is our rise, and this is our run. The number without the x in the y equals mx plus b format is a 1. So my b is a 1. So again, on the y-axis, I am going to put a dot where the graph crosses it. Remember, the graph crosses the y-axis at positive 1. Then I'll have my rise and my run. I'm going to do my rise. I'm just going to show it to you in blue. And I'm going to do my run in red just to show you. So I'm going to rise 2, 1, 2. I'm going to run 1. That will put a new dot right there. Then I'm going to rise 2, run 1, and I'm going to get another dot right there. Again, you're not required to put the stair steps, but if it helps you with the counting of the slope, you can. I can go in the other direction where my line is going uphill. I can go in the other direction in a pattern of 2 and 1. And then a pattern of 2 and 1. Okay, so that's my rise and my run. I like to show you that. But I'm going to take those off because that was just to show you. And next time I'm going to do it without showing you that. And then I have my line. When you draw a line, draw a nice line through all your points. Go beyond your points with arrows on both ends. Because a line does go on forever. And it doesn't just go through those 4 points. It goes through a lot more points. That's just your guide to know where your line is on the graph. Y equals -1/2 x minus 3. Again, the slope, the m, is -1/2. Rise over run. The y-intercept, or the b value, is -3. So we are going to begin this graph at -3 on the y-axis. So I'm going to put a dot at -3. My rise and run is negative. I should be going downhill. So I'm going to go down 1 and over 2. See, this time I didn't show you my stair steps. I'm going to count down 1 and over 2. Again, this line should go downhill. Why? Because the slope is negative. So I can do my same pattern this way. Rising of 1 and running of 2. But it goes downhill. Nice line through those points and beyond with arrows on both ends. I begin my line at -3. Then I use my slope to know how steep it is. Go down 1 and over 2. I can go in both directions, keeping my line going downhill. We did have an exception. Y equals 3. And we talked about this on the chart we did right at the beginning of this video. Again, it's y equals 3, so the y-intercept is still 3. But there is no slope. So these dots go straight across in both directions because there is a 0 slope. It's a flat line right through the y-intercept of 3. There's still a y, but remember this is represented by y equals 0x plus 3. There isn't an x in the problem, so slope is nothing, 0. And then the y is 3 all the time. So I stay along the 3 of the y-axis. This is the y-axis here. I'm staying along through the 3 on the y-axis. I go through the y-axis because it's y equals 3. Then the other exception we looked at is x. So if I say x is -4, this is the only time in this lesson that you will go on the x-axis instead of the y. So you don't start, because this one does not have a y-intercept, because there's no y in the problem. So we have x is -4, and this line goes straight up and down. It is an exception to the rule, because it does not have a slope. It's undefined. So m is undefined, meaning it has no definition. It is a straight up and down line. There is not a greatest number in the world, so it's undefined. And b, there is no y y-intercept. You notice that here is my y-axis. That red line never crosses that y-axis. Never crosses it. So since it never crosses it, it is not going to be able to do that. I'm trying to erase this, but it's not erasing it. But it never crosses that y-axis. I was just trying to show you that. There it goes. Erasing now. That was just showing you where the y-axis was so that you could see. But that's what the graph looks like. X is -4. Only time you go on the X, that line is vertical, straight up and down, through the X axis. Through the X axis. Okay, the last example. Y equals -4x plus 6. We're back to this. We got our y value, our number in front of our x right here is our slope. The number by itself right here is the y-intercept. So we're going to go to 6 on the y-axis. We're going to go down 4. So 6, if we go down 4 from 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. That takes us down to 2. And again, every whole number has a 1 over it. So you don't just go down 4. You got to go over 1. And down 4 more and over 1. Notice that I went down 1, 2, 3, 4 spots, okay? Down 4. Over 1. I can do it again. 1, 2, 3, 4, over 1. Keep that same slope pattern. Now we can't go in the other direction, or we could, but this graph it isn't that long. So we're going to draw our nice line through there. It's having a little communication problem with my stylus. So we're going to do a line straight down through there, best you can, a little sketch of that line. And that's how you do these. So you're going to do some practice with naming the slope and the y-intercept, and also with some graphing. Good luck and have a great day.